Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to the first lecture video of the second week of March. So in this week, we will take a look at Chapter 5, the Principle of Design. Before you get started with this lecture, make sure that you have submitted all the assignments and also finished your first exam. So in this chapter, we will learn how to describe how artists create unity and variety, how artists identify types of balance found in art, and to explain how artists emphasize and subordinate parts of work, to relate how scale and proportion function in art, and characterize the use of rhythm in art, and to analyze formal elements and principle of design. So the last point here is going to be the most important one. But in this lecture, we're going to take a look at these two, describing how artists create unity and variety, and then how to identify types of balance found in art. So before we get into the principle of designs, I want to talk about what is composition. So in the last chapter, chapter 4, the visual elements, we talked about the elements of design, such as line, shape, volume, light, color, etc. But how does artists organize them to express their creativity and artistic voice and turn them into a work of art? So in this chapter, chapter 5, we will learn how artists create their composition for their work. But what is composition? So in fine art, the definition of composition is the combination of multiple parts into a harmonious whole. In simpler terms, it means how artwork is put together. So in a well-composed design, the visual elements such as point, line, shape, texture, value, and color work together as a team. And as one element becomes dominant, the other elements must adjust accordingly. Right, so let's take a look at the first principle of design, which is going to be unity and variety. So unity can be defined as a similarity, togetherness, or cohesion. It is a sense of oneness, or things belonging together and making up a coherent whole. So variety, on the other hand, can be defined as a difference which provides interest. Unity and variety generally coexist in a work of art, and they are the cornerstones of a composition. So in the right combination, unity and variety can create compositions that are both cohesive and lively. So when you take a look at Henri Matisse's Memory of Oceania, the first thing that strikes us is the variety of the colors and the shapes. However, as we look more closely, we start to find unity within this work. So the number of colors is limited, and it has the clear repetition among them, which create visual connections across the entire picture plane here. Let's break it down, the unity, a little bit closely. So in this example, a painting by Mark Ridey, he used three major strategies to unify his composition, as you can see on this diagram right over here. So first, all the major shapes are organized diagonally from the lower left corner from right here to the upper right. So it has that strong diagonal going from lower left to the upper top. A series of parallel lines of the sea and sand emphasizes the diagonal structure, as you can see right over here. And second, the top third of the painting is filled with the blue water, while the beach fills the bottom 2/3, which is the rule of thirds, excuse me, to create this visually pleasing imagery. And this proportional relationship has been used since antiquity, which is the ancient Greek, to create a dynamic form of balance. And third, the most obvious would be the repetitive shapes of umbrellas and visual elements in here. However, a sailboat and the red umbrella breaks this unity and introduces variety within the composition. The red umbrella, most eye-catching one, breaks the repetition and acts as a focal point, a point where our attention goes to first. So as we begin to notice the number of people clustered around this umbrella, we are pulled into the painting and the miniature world it represents. So these are the 5 unifying forces that create unity in a composition. So through these forces, artists and designers create a strong unifying and variety, at the same time exploring the strength of both principles. Artists and designers use many strategies to create unified compositions, and Gestalt psychology offers a fascinating analysis of these strategies. So according to this theory is which you will be hearing a lot when you get into, if you study graphic design, it is the theory that argues that we understand visual information holistically before we examine it separately. So we first scan the entire puzzle, then analyze the specific parts. That's the argument of this theory. So let's take a look at this video explaining Gestalt psychology.
When looking at this, what's the first thing you see? Do you see a bicycle? Or do you see handlebars, pedals, spokes, tires, brakes, a seat, and a frame? If you're human, I'm guessing you saw a bike. This idea that we make sense of things by seeing a whole rather than the individual parts is called Gestalt psychology, and its principles are especially important for designers in creating complete and compelling visuals. Because of psychologists Max Wertheimer, Kurt Koffka, and Wolfgang Kohler, Gestalt theory can be broken down into 6 design principles. Figure ground. The thought that when we look at a scene, we separate objects so that some are the focus, or figure, and others are the background. Similarity. The notion that we place objects with similar characteristics in a group. These characteristics could include color, size, font, shape, texture, and more. Proximity. The belief that we group together objects that are close to each other. Closure. The idea that our minds close objects that are not necessarily together or complete in order to create a whole. Continuity. The theory that we continue to follow objects that are visually aligned until they are interrupted. Order. The belief that alignment and symmetry are attractive and essential elements of design. When Gestalt principles are ignored, designs tend to look out of place or incomplete, forcing our eyes to focus on little inconsistencies rather than the greater whole. You may not know exactly what seems off, but you will feel something is out of place. The best designs, unintentionally, make the world feel a little less chaotic.
Alright, there's the crash course on the Gestalt theory. So let's take a look at the unifying force. So first is going to be grouping. So when presented with a collection of separate visual units, we immediately try to create order and make connections within the composition. So grouping is one of the first steps in this process, and we generally group visual units by location, orientation, shape, and color. So for example, in the example image A on the far left right here, forms two distinct groups through location despite their difference in shape. As you can see, these are definitely different shapes, but because the location is top and bottom, it creates that kind of a grouping. And also the shading is the pure black right here and relatively gray here, also creates the grouping here. And in the image B, the diagonal orientation of elements create cohesion of different shapes. So all the elements are positioned in diagonally, so which creates the unity within the composition. And image C, they are grouped by the shapes and shades as well. So triangles, circles, and squares. The repetition, just like how it sounds, occurs when we use the same visual elements or effect over and over and over. So this painting of Russian constructivist on the right over here, Vasily Kandinsky, shows the example of repetition where he repeated circles to create a cohesive design despite a wide range of colors. Another great use of repetition is on the left right here, where the artist created a powerful composition through the heavy use of repetition of this the camera, surveillance camera. In design, the distance between visual elements is called proximity. And these three images show how close proximity helps to increase unity. So more distance shapes read as separate events in the image B right over here. Fusion occurs when shapes or volumes are placed so close together that they share a common edge, which you can see on the image A right here. And when shapes of similar color and texture fuse, they can create new negative shapes as the surrounding area becomes more clearly defined, as you can see in the image C right over here. So negative space, the positive space is going to be these black triangles and these elements, and the negative space will be these white shapes right over here. So in this famous work of art, Michelangelo's creation of Adam in one of the fresco paintings in the Sistine Chapel, the ceilings of Sistine Chapel, we can see the example of how artists used proximity to create an exhilarating imagery and convey the subject matter and the content. So a careful use of proximity can create visual tension, adding energy to the design, as you can see in this painting. The image depicts the creation of Adam from the book of Genesis in the Bible, in which God gives life to Adam, the first man. And just take a look at the lifelessness and the weak posture of Adam, and the powerful and purposeful and determined depiction of God, and the proximity between their fingers and how it amplifies the content of this work. Continuity may be defined as a fluid connection among compositional parts. So this connection can be actual or implied. With actual continuity, which each shape touches an adjoining shape, with implied, we mentally make the connections. So skillful use of continuity can add visual movement to a design. So movement creates deliberate visual pathways and helps to direct the viewer's attention to areas of particular interest, as you can see in Frank Steller's painting right over here. So the curving lines and the shapes flows from one circle to the next, creating this actual continuity. And the color distribution creates implied continuity, which enhances the overall the visual flow. Right. So next unifying force is going to be movement. So movement within composition is very important. So in this work that we looked at before, Theodore Géricault's Wrath of the Medusa, the Géricault used a pattern of diagonal lines to direct our attention to a single point, which is this guy right over here. And this guy is working as a focal point. Focal point is a primary point of interest in the composition, like we talked before. And often this is the first point of place where our attention goes. So it is often used to emphasize an area of particular importance, or to provide a strong sense of compositional direction, as you can see in this imagery right here. Let's take a look at these works by Marc de Suvero. So can you see the movement within these compositions? So just take a look at the directional lines that are created by these long steel I-beams and how they are interacting with each other to create this visual movement that is piercing through the three-dimensional space. And it is so exquisite. So let's take a moment from all these terminologies and look closer into this artist who's still alive and still creates, cranking out amazing number of work of art. If you visit any kind of a big city, you will see his sculptures in downtown areas. That's how famous this guy is.
Ma Lowell, who's known to everybody as Malo, who educated a whole group of children in San Francisco. She was a widow who had 2 children. She said to me when I was about 8 years old, "You read too many books. I'm going to show you how to work with your hands." And I didn't know it then, but like there are these people in your life who can come along and they say and they do something, and suddenly they have changed your whole life. And 40 years later, you find out, wow, that's where my life changed. All my early work was wood, and I became a house painter in order to get away from high school. And then I became a boat builder. And I learned so much as a boat builder that it was amazing. I read a book about philosophy, and it changed my life. I knew I wanted to go back to school. So I went back and majored in philosophy until I found sculpture. One is very limited working in wood, and I had always wanted to work in steel. I worked in steel in Berkeley. It's very expensive. These tools are horrible in terms of being expensive. Cranes and trucks and cherry pickers and welders and MIG welders, plasmas, like these are all state of the art. And to reach the level of being able to use them, you have to have training, and nobody wants to train somebody who's untrained. Manuel Neri and I both got the same grant, and they gave us a couple of $1,000s. He bought a church, and I bought a crane with 2 dead motors. A crane operator in Canada taught me an awful lot. And suddenly it was like unknown piano player discovering the piano. With steel, you can do things that are spatial that no other material can do. Not just in terms of tension, in terms of cantilever, you have brilliant people like Ken Snelson that can do things that look as close to magic as we can believe. Most people don't know that they live in steel. They drive a car, they know that it's a steel car, they know that the motor is steel, but they don't really realize that that's the difference of when they push their foot on the pedal, that's why they can go faster than anybody can run. Steel has allowed all the skyscrapers. What I've tried is to have the joy of spirit out of steel. And steel has so often been nothing but an element of warfare and other horrible things. It's not the fault of steel. It's the fault of human beings that's used that way.
All right, so that's Marc de Suvero, one of my favorite artists. All right, let's get back to the 5, the principle of design. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the last, the grouping force, the closure. So closure refers to the mind's inclination to connect fragmented information to produce a completed form. So in this image, Kevin Curry created a self-portrait from paint samples he collected from a nearby store. And from close-up, the image is simply a collection of evenly colored squares. However, from a distance, closure transforms them into a man's face. So that is how the closure works, and that is it for the unifying forces. Let's take a look at the next principle of design, which is going to be balance. So in design, balance refers to the distribution of weight or force within a composition. So negative and positive shapes can work together to create an equilibrium among compositional units, regardless of variations in their size, weight, or shape. So we can define visual weights in two ways. First, weight refers to the inclination of shapes to float or sink. Second, weight can refer to the relative importance of a visual element within a design. So the compositional forces that most influence visual weight are the size and type of shape, its texture or value, its location within the compositional frame, and its orientation. So the orientation of the composition as a whole also affects weight and balance. So which is the most dynamic and which is the most stable position of the box in this picture right over here? The overall compositional format also affects balance. So using dramatic vertical shape within a tall vertical format, the artist here captures the soaring energy of Wall Street in the picture, thus creating this unique balance between the visual elements that would not be possible for a horizontal framing. So whereas the compositional dynamics change dramatically when a square format is used, as you can see on the right over here, of Catherine Frant's racial radical acts. The visual weight can also refer to the relative importance of a visual element within a design. So in this work, Moonrise, Ansel Adams combined balance, gravity, and movement to create an image that is both tranquil and dramatic. So a square format dominated by horizontal lines provides stability, so such as the mountainscapes and the clouds and things like that. Everything is very horizontal and stable. And the quiet village sinks to the bottom of the design. But the tiny moon positioned just to the left of the compositional center pulls us to the pitch black sky in the top half of the image. So as the focal point of the image, this tiny moon has the most visual weight in this photograph. Alright, so let's take a look at how balance is achieved. Symmetrical balance occurs when shapes are mirrored on either side of an axis, as in a composition that is vertically divided down the center, as you can see on the A right over here. And a shift in this axis creates symmetry between the top and bottom of a design, as you can see on this B right over here. And so in this case, the axis will be the right over here in the center vertically, and then here it'll be the axis will be this guy right here horizontally in between these two elements, in between these two mirrored elements. So a symmetrically balanced design can appeal to our desire for equilibrium and communicate calm and stability. The Taj Mahal was built by a 17th century Indian emperor as a tomb for his beloved wife. So the three, if you take a look at this, the three white marble domes and the four flanking towers create this architectural symmetry And in the reflecting pool, a mirror image appears, making it even more symmetrical. Beautiful work of architecture, worth taking a closer look at. It's located in India. Let's take a look at all the symmetry that this architecture has. All these patterns to create unity within the each panels of walls. Very visually pleasing. Shouts out to the stability of this idea. And dramatic music as well. That's Taj Mahal, located in India. Alright, so let's take a look at different type of symmetry. So that'll be the radial symmetry. So with radial symmetry, lines and shapes are mirrored both vertically and horizontally. And the center of the composition acts as a focal point. So would that be this guy right over here? For example, the center of the Balakula mask in figure 3.26, which is this guy right here, this radial symmetry is symmetrically balanced. But by contrast, the surrounding ring of faces and hands create a radial balance. So in this case, the center point right here is symmetrically balanced by using this vertical axis, whereas these surrounding faces are created with the radial symmetry, with the center point, the reference point of center in here. So in this Zach Weinberg square series, it presents a 16 variation of radial balance, and using a laser cutter, he was able to transform sheets of masonite and wood into a wide range of these elegant designs. See that it all has that the reference, the focal center point of the symmetry. There. An alternative to radial balance is a spiral. So a spiral can increase energy within a circular format or add movement to a rectangular composition. So in Christina Klein's Kansas Winds, a visual vortex pulls our eyes from the bottom of the composition to the top, and the diagonals with this vortex contrast sharply with the more stable vertical and horizontal shapes that define the blue building in the background. So asymmetrical balance creates equilibrium among visual elements that do not mirror each other on either side of an axis. So depending on the degree of asymmetry, the resulting design may be quite stable or very dynamic or nearly chaotic. So we can use many strategies to create an asymmetrical balance. So let's take a look at one by one. So in A, we can place a large shape close to the fulcrum while placing a small shape further away, just as child at the end of a seesaw can balance an adult near the center, so large and small shape can be balanced, as you can see in design 1. In B, we can use several small shapes to balance a large shape, as you can see right over here. And 3, a small solid square can balance a large open circle. The solidity and stability of the square, the solid square, gives it additional weight, as you can see in Exhibit C right here. D, right over here, we can balance the textured shape near the fulcrum with a lighter open shape that we place farther away. So our mind makes this square heavier than this open shape right over here. The asymmetrical balance becomes even more interesting when we add a boundary. So because the negative space isn't important as each positive space, we can now create more complex compositions. Alright, so let's take a look at these 4 exhibits one by one. So a small shape placed near the bottom of the format balances our large shape placed along the top, right, as you can see right here. And especially within a tall rectangle, shapes placed near the top tends to rise, and the shapes placed near the bottom tends to sink, as you can see right over here. In B, when the small square intersects with the bottom edge and the large square moves away from the edge, the differences in weight becomes even more pronounced. So in Exhibit C, the top shape now gains energy through its diagonal orientation. We talked about how diagonal packs such more visual movement. And we need 3 bottom shapes to create this balance, because this has such amount of information. We need 3 of these to balance it out. And finally, in D, a small aggressive triangle can balance a large passive rectangle, because triangle has much more, like I said, it packs more information by having like a emotional reaction to it at the same time. Just kind of this variety of the use of shape, because this rectangular frame and then this rectangle and this is triangle, so this carries much more energy than this shape of rectangle. So that's why we can balance it, this large rectangle with this small triangle right over here. So balance in the composition shift each time we add or subtract a visual element. So P.M. Mondrian's composition number 2 in red, blue, and yellow right over here is constructed from black vertical and horizontal lines. The 3 brightly colored shapes and 4 wide rectangles. You could say, oh, my 4-year-old nephew can make a painting like that, but if you take a close look at it, you start to notice how carefully the composition is balanced. So placed at the bottom of the painting, the tiny yellow rectangle in the lower right corner provides an essential counterbalance to the large shapes in these designs, and so on. So on the left, the poster, this design, shows how balance is achieved among multiple layers of text within a vertical rectangle. The vertical rectangular framing here. So a light blue shape fills the top half of the image, then dissolves into the white space at the bottom, and a horizontal block of text is positioned slightly below the center, while along the right edge, a vertical block of text pulls our attention upward. So the word action is enclosed by a flat line, as you can see right over here. And 5 lines of orange text connects the horizontal and vertical axis, with 3 near the bottom and 2 running parallel to the right edge. And finally, the tiny red logo positioned nearby creates a visual exclamation point. So each type of balance has its advantages. So the approximate symmetry that Frida Kahlo used for her double self-portrait on the right over here is symbolically appropriate and compositionally effective. So painted in a response to her divorce from painter Diego Rivera, it represents the beloved Frida in the native costume on the right and the rejected Frida in European dress on the left right here. And a linear vein connects the two women's heart. In some cases, a degree of imbalance is necessary, so this painting used to create imbalance within its composition. So the table in the foreground, which is this table right here, is tilted, and the bowl of fish seems impossibly large compared to this figure right here. And pulled by the diagonal lines leading to the house, the pool also seems skewed, while the tiny women are more like dolls than people. And manning the grill, the father looks on approvingly at his son engaging in a little recreational fire breathing, and the entire scene seems to be slightly bold at the same time. So this spatial distortion combined with a bizarre collection of objects and events turns a family picnic into a suburban nightmare, which this artist was intended. All right, that is it for today's lecture. So this week, make sure to submit the color exercise that we did last week by Friday, 11:59 p.m. And if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll see you guys on the next lecture video.